Hello and welcome. My name is Trismegistus, and today we're going to be squelching through and speculating about the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 413, Gleba, posted by Albert and Erendel. Introduction, by Albert. Making a new world in Factorio is relatively easy. Just create a new set of tiles for the ground, add some new models of trees, create a bunch of new decoratives, some decals, optional, a new skin for the cliffs, optional, and bam! You've got a new planet. Well, to be fair, you also have to play with the terrain generation noise and auto-place algorithms, experiment with proper LUTs, and adding some new shaders won't hurt either if you want to succeed. Just to interject, I think LUTs is a lookup table. It's basically one of the ways you can do colour correction or colour changes in a game, where you basically have a lookup table for a colour set. You then change the colours and use that as your new lookup table, and it's a way of introducing variety to things without having to do too much extra work, so you can change the colour of stuff and just save those colours as kind of a list, essentially. So I think that's what they're referring to, but it could be something else. The problem of making it from this simplistic perspective is the danger of falling into a superficial automation, something like that. So probably all your planets will end up looking the same with just different colours. Gleba is the one planet that has all the things needed to make a new Nauvis-like planet in Factorio, but it is still different on many other levels. What makes Gleba very special, at least to me, is how we twisted the core concept of the planet and pushed the necessary elements in a specific way to make it more unique. So I suppose digging into that slightly before we really get into the meat of this, a Nauvis-like planet would imply biology. You've got animals and you've got trees and you've got bushes, I guess, are what some of the decoratives are meant to be. You've got water, meaning plain H2O water, so it's not fancy water. You've got cliffs, you've got deserts, you've got enemies, basically. So I suppose making that distinct from a biological thing, you've got actual things that want to kill you and that you need to kill. You've got a pollution mechanic. You've got the basic resources, so copper, iron, stone, coal, oil, and uranium, I suppose, as well. But if those are the basic concepts, then the idea here is that there is going to be a lot of similarity with Gleba and Nauvis, but they've twisted it, they've changed it and made it very different, and we'll see how different, in order to give it its unique feel. Before having its final name, Gleba was internally called Biological Planet, and an obvious direction for that would be a planet looking like a jungle. This would be fine for a new biome in Nauvis, but for an exotic planet, never explored and full of life, more than ever, this time we needed something more alien-looking. With not too many cliches in it, extravagant, and if possible, playing with new colour palettes. But also with some link to the reality of Nauvis. And it needs to look very different from Nauvis. Okay. This is kind of what I've been suspecting. I think Gleba was intended to be revealed a little bit earlier. I obviously don't know that, but it's had the feeling that perhaps the last couple of Friday Facts, maybe 2 or 3, have been kind of brought forward. They were perhaps meant for a bit later, which is why they've lacked sort of too many teases, and they've been quality of life stuff, because that's sort of safe to talk about. So it's kind of talked about later in the blog, but they're having to reveal the planet now because there's stuff they need to talk about, want to talk about, that is related to Gleba, but that perhaps they couldn't have talked about without effectively telling us what Gleba is all about. So whatever the resources are, whatever the mechanics are on this planet, in order to do Friday Facts about those, they need to tell us what this planet is and what it does and what its theme is. But what it's also saying is that the reason for the delay is the artwork. So everything we're about to see, and I'm kind of trying to blend this warning in, is kind of placeholder and concept, and it's not how the final game will look. I'm trying to get that in early and quickly because, I sort of tried to do it with the music one as well, and there will be a piece of music in this that is part of the new soundtrack. It's very, very difficult to separate that, well, this is what it looks like now, that's what it must look like in the end. So I guess the point is that as good as this looks, and it does look amazing, it perhaps will look a bit different in the final game. I'm not saying worse or better, but it may not be looking quite like this when we actually get to see it. But I'm guessing the core concepts are there, and that's why they felt they could reveal it. So we started to think about the microcosms of the world of lichen, fungi and algae under the sea. Something that exists in our reality, which is believable already, but it has all the requirements mentioned above. So I say this video does have some audio, so I'll kind of let it play out. It's also bigger in the actual video, so we'll look at the full size version, but it's just worth noting the first paragraph underneath, which says, "In this video we made the effort of showing what exactly we have in mind for the look and feel of Gleba. The planet is still work in progress, but we better show it now because we will need to keep showing elements of Gleba in future posts." Okay, so this is the full video. I just made myself a little bit smaller so that you can see the full thing. This is the full size video. We'll play it through, and I say I will shut up and we can listen to it as well, because it does have a new piece of music with it. Okay, so there's a lot in that. I guess just to give some comments, I'll do the full speculation at the end, but just to give some comments, and starting at the end here, we do see red specks here. This is the first planet where we have seen definite there will be enemies. You know, whether they're biters or not, what are they, we don't know. But we have seen red spots here, and that does get mentioned in the blog later on. So it's just to say, I think that's it means that there are enemies here. The other thing, as we say, if this is kind of Nauvis themed or Nauvis adjacent in some way, we have the basic resources. So we have blue patches, which are, I thought there was one up there as well. There's only one down the bottom here, a blue patch. Is there another one? I can't see another one. But we've got an orange patch there, so the blue patch would be iron, The orange patch there would be copper. We've then got what I assume are stone patches. There's quite a lot of those. We don't see coal. I don't think. I can't see coal on this image, which doesn't mean it's not there. It's just that there's not coal on this one. I mean, these are tiny patches, so that could mean something. I also don't see the oil patches, but then we do have these bright pink splodges, so they could be hidden in those, but certainly don't seem to see oil or coal on the map. There is also no uranium, but we're kind of not expecting to see uranium on any other planet than Nauvis. I guess stepping just a couple of images through the video, the theme I get from it, and it's what they're mentioning, is more of an undersea world that's on the surface, if you see what I mean. So a lot of these entities, things, biological structures look like, so these look like barnacles, these look like, what do you call them, coral reefs, the arm things that come out of coral reefs. These look like, again, more sort of seaweedy type things, more sort of barnacle-like structures. These look horrible. I have trypophobia, which is a fear of like random ice holes in things. And I mean, fear is a strong word. It's more like a disgust reaction. These things trigger me like nothing we've seen in the game before. Even the aliens don't, the biters don't quite trigger me on that. But yeah, they're horrible. But they're sort of fruiting bodies, like like mushrooms or something like that, and say more things that look like barnacles on ships. And this looks like that matting that you get some type of seaweed forms. They get very green. There's very, very sharp colour contrast changes in this. So this looks more in the territory of sort of algal blooms, the big mats of algae that you get on rivers. We're getting very shallow water here. And what's in particularly interesting is that it seems to have depth in the water. Now that might be something that they will have to do quite a lot of work to, because the current water doesn't really have depth, it's just a surface, and you can see the shadows of fish in it, but you can never actually see fish through the water, no matter how shallow or deep they're meant to be. Whereas this appears to have water that is semi-translucent, so you can sort of see things in the depth of the water. So that looks like a significant change. And again, I re-emphasise that this is concept, and these may not be quite achievable things in the game, or they may look different to what we've got here. But again, we're looking like those flowers that form spreading surfaces over lakes in jungles. We've got these things here which look like those mossy tendrils that come down from trees. Again, more sort of flowers in the water. Not flowers, but those sort of flower-like structures. More sort of strange plant-like ones. These look the most, in a sense, original to me. I can't sort of tie that into a sort of an Earth native planet alike that I've seen. Then we've got on the edge here, we've got these sort of more stand-up type structures with the flowers again. Interestingly, here we've got a yellow lake of some description. As we go up here, we get into more sort of fungal growth type areas. These look a lot like stromatolites that have sort of grown up on top of each other, which are nests of bacteria, basically. Yeah, and they've got these tendrils coming out. One of the things to note is that Erondo is actually the creator of the Alien Biomes mod, and in that you have a lot greater variety in sort of colour textures in the surfaces, but they also have surface effects. So walking on certain surfaces is slower and faster than others. So I'm wondering if that's an effect we're going to see in the actual base game, because this matte stuff feels like it would be slower to walk through. We then got these structures. These are interesting. They look like pods or something like that. And again, more things that look like algae and things you would see under the sea, but of course they're now on the surface. Throughout the video, you'll see rain falling. It's a bit subtle and may not come through on the compression on YouTube, so I would urge you to go and watch the video on the Factorio Friday Facts. But basically, the whole video throughout, it sort of fades in and out of it, so maybe it's not meant to be continuous, but there's like a rainfall coming down. So is that an effect we will have? Will it have a meaning, as it were, the rain? Is the rain going to be some kind of mechanic as well? A bit like lightning is. We'll then get up here. This is the pink stuff, which I believe to be algae. Whether that has any meaning again, I don't know, or is it just for colour, for flavour, etc, etc. The cliffs are interesting. They're very, very integrated into the terrain. We'll see on the map again later on that the cliffs kind of follow the edges of the new terrain, and so it makes more sense out of why they have different heights. And the integration here is amazing. We have roots also poking through the actual cliff itself, and then we have these little spot effects on the bottom here, which look a bit like coal if I'm honest, but appears to just be effectively rubble that's kind of fallen down. We then see, and this is kind of confirming, as I say, this I believe is a stone patch, so there will be regular stone patches on Gleba. Again, these little things here, they look a bit like coal, so maybe that is meant to be coal, but when it zooms out in the map we don't actually see a coal patch there, and it is very, very dispersed, so I think it's probably just meant to be sort of rocks or something like that. We then get a really big pan out and we see the full sort of panorama. This happens to be a very fungal area. They make a lot of references to mycelia, and so there's a lot of sort of fungal type growths on this planet, and that's, I believe, what we're seeing here is sort of a field of funguses effectively and things of that nature. An interesting Gleba actually is, the meaning of it is, it says here, the fleshy spore-bearing inner mass of certain fungi such as puffballs or stinkhorn, and you can imagine these being some form of puffball type structure. Again, if there's any gameplay mechanics for that, we'll kind of talk about that later. But yeah, that's a sort of roundup of what's going on. So we then get a flip to a map. I think this is the actual map, because if you look at that, this is actually a pre-built map. It's not generated, which it explains. But if you notice, the cliffs do match up with what's going on. And so as we zoom out, we see normal resources as well as some enemies. But again, it does have a strong feel of an Alien Biomes type implementation. The map was handmade, but with a realistic vision of the autoplace algorithm and the map generation. The trees used are concept art used as placeholders. The cliffs are also placeholders. Some tilesets will get tweaked to integrate them better. Some doodads will be added and modified. Colour grading is less or more missing, and the rain shader on the foreground will be tweaked. For a planet full of life, more than ever, now it looks very static, but we are planning on adding some more animated things to really bring some life to the experience. And that's what I would say about it. It is very static. The water's obviously moving, but all of these things don't really do anything. They're all just sort of sat there. Because they're art, they're just a picture that's been drawn, basically. And you would assume, when it talks about trees, I assume it's a conceptual tree, because we don't actually see anything I would classify as a tree necessarily. But these things, you'd expect the fronds to be wiggling a bit, and these things, the actual bulbous entities, even though it's going to freak me out even more, you'd expect them to be sort of be pulsing in and out, and given a little bit of animation. Again, more things, fronds that are going to wiggle, and these things could, pulsate and what have you. And it just feels like the whole planet is going to be kind of squelchy and biological and squishy, But none of that's actually in place yet. And overall, we are avoiding to show, on purpose, the red area of the planet. Look at the map during the last frames of the video. That one is too early to show. And I think that's referring to these red dots, basically. So it doesn't mean a red area of the map, it's not a chunk of the map that's red. It's referring to these dots, which are whatever the enemies are, be they biters or something else entirely. This video would be 55% worse, or more, if Peter hadn't composed and recorded this soundtrack for Gleba. You do remember our dear Peter, right? From the Friday Facts 406 Space Age music. The track is not exactly as it will sound during the game. Now he is finishing some remixes of the tracks to make them flow perfectly fine for the gameplay requirements. Now our usual galactic tour operator will guide us through the sophisticated nuances of the nature of the biomes and habitats of Gleba. Welcome to Gleba. By Arundel. Your descent ends in an unsettling splash. Fortunately, you're not sinking. The noises of your landing pod spool down and fade into the soothing sound of rain. The hatch opens to reveal a green, swampy landscape shrouded in a light mist. Fix-It Corporation. Oh, sorry, wrong thing. The air is thick and humid, carrying the muffled cries of unseen animals from far away. You leave your pod and wade through the shallow, murky turquoise water. There's so much vegetation and detritus floating on the surface that it's difficult to see the bottom, even though in most places it's barely up to your knee. It almost feels like whatever is below the surface is squirming under you. Strange, twisted fungi grow out of the water, snaking and undulating as they rise like malformed trees. Hair-like tendrils droop from the ends of their slender branches, caressing you with a sticky mucus as you try to make your way beneath them. So these must be the trees then, I guess. This is the image that accompanies this. And, I mean, this water is sort of turquoise, I guess. It's not quite that strong. But yeah, I think these are meant to be the trees then. I hadn't twigged that. There is something here I just realised. I don't know if that's a tree as well. But it looks more like a coincidence of structure in that that's meant to be going on the ground. And then that's more like grass. So I think, yes, these blue end things are tendril. You climb the shore, and although you're out of the water, this can hardly be called dry land. The wet, rubbery ground squelches beneath your foot like olive blubber. Olive blubber? Wow. The landscape is covered by a tangled network of root-like mycelium and thick mats of various colourful lichen. This complex, interweaving carpet is home to all manner of tiny animals that skitter inside to avoid your gaze. Presumably mostly insects and amphibians, their chirps and hisses signal their annoyance at your step nearby. So I'm guessing this is why they've introduced, they put the thing in with the trees, that they have like dogs barking and birds chirping. And I'm guessing this is kind of a better use for it in a sense, in that it's going to make this planet feel really inhabited and alive, to have a constant background of insects and, croaking frogs and just tiny little things that you can't see, that they're not there on the map, as it were. They're not there on the visuals of the game, but because you can hear them, you get the feeling that there's all these bugs squirming around and inhabiting this world. This area is dominated by fungal cups that catch the rain and stew their own little ecosystems. Many of them are smaller than a hand, but the largest of them are huge, funneled trunks of bark-like material, their structure riddled with holes and infested with small, pink, wormy things. The occasional slime mould blankets a large area of the terrain with a sticky yellow slime. Its surface is dotted with the occasional balloon of gas. So I'm guessing these are the things that catch water and have like, little sort of fermentation-y, biological ecosystems going on in them. And these are meant to be the bigger ones, where they kind of, capture the water in a sense in the middle of them perhaps. And, there's a little stewing, icky mess in the middle. These pink, I assume these are the pink worms poking out of the actual structure, and that maybe we'll see them wiggling in the end game sort of thing. They look a bit like those, like water lilies, the giant water lilies that you can actually, kids can, not someone as big as me, but kids can actually sort of stand on them. They're so big and they're, sufficiently buoyant. So this yellow thing, I guess, which I pointed out before, that was like a yellow water, is perhaps meant to be a slime mould? Sickly yellow slime. Yeah, slime mould. And has occasional balloons of gas. Interesting. The surface starts to firm up as you make your way out of the lowlands, becoming more like a spongy bark. The vegetation shapes of this area are more wispy and fragile. Desaturated shades of green and teal give the region a beautiful but ghostly appearance. Towering stalks of lichen fan out at the top of a translucent umbrella, always splitting into 5 branches before sending down tough, stinging fronds. I assume that's these, because that's a towel-like structure, and I can't count them all, but that one certainly there has 5 fronds, and that one has 5 fronds. Interesting, it says stinging fronds. These things are pretty horrible. They look like maggots poking out of the surface. That's really nasty. Going higher still, the ground is drier. In this area, the incessant rain of the planet is reduced to a faint spitting. Groundwater is quickly absorbed into the pitted rock-like surface, making this the first place with solid footing. On closer inspection, the ground appears to be a giant merged mass of dark grey stromatolites. It seems that every part of this place is alive. Large towers of beige sponge reach out for the sky, filtering the air and releasing spores into the gentle breeze. Vibrant yellow, bulb-like creatures erupt from their pores near their tops, almost like flowers blooming in the sun. So this is them, the really horrible things with the yellow, what does it call them? It calls them creatures, bulb-like creatures. I'd assume they were sort of more like flowers, but these things with the little eyes. Ugh. On the other side of the hill, the landscape shifts to autumnal hues. The lichen mats here are a crusty orange. The ground is pierced by many thorny vines of dark fungal mycelium, which surround and guard their fruiting bodies, which sags on the ground like a large soft red grape. So this was the fruiting body I was talking about, the blob thing. That's them, and those are mycelia. I guess that's the frond things there. These are meant to be, and it does look a lot like lichen, so these are sort of mats of lichen, the orange stuff. And then mycelia. And mycelia is actually the thing that funguses use to actually It kind of really, in fact, is a fungus, but it's the underground bit of the fungus. The bit you see on the top is just like the fruiting bodies. So that's the equivalent of a flower, basically. The biology of fungi is bizarre. They're a completely different thing to animals and plants. It's fascinating if you look into it, but yeah, they're very different to everything else on the planet. So I guess the idea is that these are like the fruiting bodies. There's a lot of reference in this to things being dangerous, so that's something we might speculate a bit about. The largest mushrooms here have bulbous trunks that support a huge inflated spore sac. In many cases, new sacs grow on top of the previous growths in a precarious stack of balloons ready to rupture. So that's these things here, I assume. These are the mushrooms, and these are the, shall we call them, fruiting bodies? Now, I would suspect these are Gleba, basically. So, as I said, a Gleba is the fruiting body of a mushroom, and this is what's being referred to here, that these are the bulbous trunks of large mushrooms, sacs on the top, which are basically the Gleba. So these could be the key structure for what's going on, because the whole planet is effectively named after them. The way forward leads to lower ground once again, but here the swampy wetland has more reds than greens. Delicate blankets of translucent pink lichen flop helplessly like seaweed on the shore, their fan-like shape contorted into a mass of slippery wrinkles. The thick, squishy carpet of pink and red lichen bulges when stepped on. The paler areas are almost translucent, revealing the root system under the surface. Here, the root-like mycelium is looking more tentacle-like and spongy. This area is infested with varying sizes of tubular coral that are eager to protrude above the water's surface. The water-dwelling examples are more vibrant and the land versions more sickly. Lovely. All sorts of stuff on this, isn't there? So we've got the very pink water here. We've got all sorts of poking out things. This is meant to be the squelchy, semi-translucent surface that he's talking about. Along with the sounds of rain, various animal calls have been constant companions so far. Mysterious, distant wails and cries once formed a background chatter, but now one of the sounds is now noticeably closer. The source cannot be seen, but it abruptly breaks into a trumpeting scream. The small creatures lurking in the lichen undergrowth suddenly go silent. Now there is a new sound, the sound of great waves crashing, followed by an earth-shaking stomp, 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 each one louder than the last. I'm sure you can't wait to concrete this place over. So as always, wade through the other feedback and rain your thoughts down upon us in the usual places. Okay, so speculation. I guess start with overall thoughts. It does look amazing. Just a little in-joke from the devs on the title. They often do this on their thumbnails. I couldn't really say it because the asteroid one has a quite funny thumbnail name, but I tried to keep these blogs clean and it was sort of a bit stepping over a line. But the thumbnail is just called Buhuo for real name. So this is just a confirmation that they have been kind of trolling us basically with the whole Bacchus and Buhuo, kind of leaning into those interpretations. But yes, overall thoughts on the reveal of Gleba. I mean, it looks amazing. I say I'm trying to temper my excitement with how good it looks, with the fact that it is, concept art, it is placeholder, it is work in progress. So it may not be quite as dense in the real thing. It might be slightly less detailed. It does look very static. It's a good thing the video is moving because it all just does look flat sort of thing. So when we get the animation in, I hope that's kind of adding a heck of a lot more atmosphere to it. The music is doing a little bit of heavy lifting in giving the feel to it. But yes, I'm hoping all of the atmospheric sounds that they're putting in, with you walking, it'll all be squelchy noises and there'll be bugs flying around and it'll all be very organic. As I mentioned as we were going, I have trypophobia, so the sort of hold things are particularly gross for me. But yes, overall reaction is looks amazing. Can't wait to find out what we do on it and what aliens there are and all these things that we're being teased in this video. Did also just want to note that I think it kind of is confirming that the artwork is, I don't know about behind, but perhaps there is a lot of work still to do on the artwork. I'm wondering if there will be a bit of a delay just to get it all done. I'm assuming and guessing and expecting that the mechanics are all there, that they're just not able to have produced as much artwork as needed. Because I said it actually on a live stream, the amount of artwork that is needed, they've got to do the entire planet 5 times over, and that's so much artwork. And especially this, when you see how dense and different things there are, all of these need variants and colour changes and all sorts of stuff going on. And these are completely different terrain styles going on, and the cliffs look very, very different. Although saying that, they look a lot like the volcanoes ones as it happens. But, these routes poking out, and as it mentions in the actual Friday Facts itself, you've got all of these things that you've got to play with. You've got the terrain generation, the auto-placing of everything, like the resources and the actual trees and what have you, and all of that stuff needs to use a generation system, because that's how they do the maps. They're not fixed designed maps, they are generated maps. And so it's all got to work. And if you look at this in particular, you'll notice there's a lot of thematic similarity between areas. So, you do get the occasional bit of pink, for example, but the pink and the orange, the pink and the other pink and the red, I don't know what to call the colours, are all sort of in a sort of area together and kind of work together. And this bluey dark one is close to that, and the light blue is close to... Do you know what I mean? It all has to sort of... It can't just be completely random. It has to be a tile generation system, a way of putting the planet together. An even better example of that is the cliffs, where you notice how they basically follow the edges of the different terrain types in this. It's not always 100%, but they are very close in a lot of places to the edges of things. And that's why that looked so integrated as we were going through. So yeah, the reason this looks so integrated is because it's then being tied up closely to other terrain types. So I guess it's worth first speculating about the terrain generation and that sort of thing, and what we'll see there. So first off, I guess, as I mentioned, we have these cliffs. They are very, very integrated with the terrain. It makes me wonder, if I'm totally honest, whether we will be able to destroy them. Perhaps these are protected cliffs, because this would tend to look a bit weird, I think, if this terrain didn't have the cliff around it, if you see what I mean. And the way this, falls out like this, it's a lot to cover with your cliff tile if we can suddenly blow it up and all of this goes away. So yeah, I'm wondering if this may be the first sort of protected cliff that we've encountered. We know that they are tough to get rid of on other planets, and that it's like a late game thing to take out the cliffs. So perhaps maybe these are protected cliffs. As I say, they are very closely tied to the generation of the actual areas. What's interesting in this, and I kind of pointed it out as we were going through the video, that if you look at where the cliffs are the kind of light brown thing. This map does seem to be the map that we've been walking around. It's not that they've flipped it to a separate one that they've generated. So we can take from this an inference as to what some of these things are, because when we are going through this section where we've got the stone, so we have the stone here, and before that we see a cliff line, and then we see this pink tinged pool, basically this water pool. Now if we go to the actual map version, and we know that the camera panned up, so we know that there's that stone there is the stone we were looking at. That's the cliff on the edge of it, and then we've got this dark blue area, okay? And that's surrounded by some kind of pink. So that implies to me that this dark blue, and I've been mentioning this is one of my speculations about this planet, that it will be shallow water. There may not be, although the way it talks about the biters, I think there might be, but it may be that there is no deep water on I was going to call it Bacchus then. On Gleba, that it's the only water we get is shallow water, and maybe that's the change, because shallow water you could presumably walk through, and therefore anywhere here you would be able to walk on. One of the reasons that would be important, if you think about it, is we know for 100% fact this has some kind of enemy on it. And enemies, you can create choke points with water, the big lakes create choke points. And so those are gone. If all the shallow water can be walked on by everything, you and aliens, that's all gone. They can come from any direction, etc., apart from where there's cliffs. Cliffs would then act as a funneling mechanism in the same way that current lakes, act as the moment. So that feels like a mechanical change. And of course, aliens can just go around the cliffs. If this is all walkable on, they could still come from any direction, and you would have a tough time defending some of these other than as integrating them into your walls. As I say, I believe this is stone. It does look slightly different in colour, I would say, but I think it's just a kind of a trick of the way it's being shown. So if this is stone and that it is this patch here, then I think that's also confirming, as I say, that we have regular copper patches. They may be small like this. Maybe this is one of the big problems with this planet. They're all very small patches. And then at the very least, we do see a blue patch down the bottom here, which I believe would be an iron patch. Again, it's tiny. It could also be, of course, partly that this is your spawning area, and therefore the patches are smaller, but these are tiny. These are very, very small patches. So that could be, as I say, one of the main challenges. There are lots of patches of stone, which could mean that it's a very important resource for you to process, but it could also be that it's giving you the opportunity to make a lot of walls because the enemies are going to be a problem. So I guess that leads me logically on to talking about the kind of the biological things, the plants and what have you. There are a great deal of variety in them, in the plants. It's not just trees. We're getting all sorts of different types of plants or, biological entities. To what extent they will be things, things that you can chop down and what have you, I don't know. That, there's all sorts of stuff like mini mushrooms and I say this is where I'm tempering my expectations, because if all of these are things that they need to develop or, draw basically, then that's a heck of a lot of stuff. And if they all have some form of interaction, they're not just decoratives, that's even more stuff to do basically. So I say I'm expecting some of these maybe won't actually appear in the game, or if they do, they are literally just decals, just things that are put on the surface to give it that atmosphere. They're not actually sort of interactable things. Something like this would be interactable, but there's just loads of them. I mean, there are loads and loads of different types of things that could be equivalents of trees or what have you that we interact with. My assumption is that some of these big ones will give us wood basically when chopped down, or a wood analog basically, so the game will just represent them as wood. But I don't know about every time, but most of the time everything is referred to, there is some implication of hazard to it. So for example, this is referred to as a twisted fungus looking like malformed trees. Hair-like tendrils droop down from the ends of their slender branches, caressing you with a sticky mucus as you try to make your way beneath them. Now that's not necessarily physically damaging to you, but that could be a slowdown mechanism. It could be if you go underneath one of these, let's call them trees, you slow down and you get the slowdown effect like you would from the goop that the biters fire at you. So that could be some hazard for these. And of course, if you're in combat and you're suddenly running up against these trees and there's a big field of them or what have you, or the aliens attack you from one of these fields of the blue tree things, the slowdown effect could be quite significant and makes it a lot more difficult to fight the aliens, for example. We then have the slime mould, talking about a sickly yellow slime and surface dotted with occasional balloon of gas. I'll come back to the balloon of gas later, but if this is a sickly yellow slime, the colour of it is quite similar to sulfuric acid, so one possibility is it might be acidic. I don't think it will actually be a source of sulfuric acid, because that would be kind of repeating a similar mechanic to volcanous fumaroles. But I do think the gas is an implication of something. But it could be that this is hazardous to walk through. It's some kind of damaging to you. If you were just to stand there, it would slowly eat away at your health and armour, etc., etc. These things here look like they might be quite dangerous. They are described as huge funnel trunks of bark-like material. Their structure riddled with holes and infested with small pink wormy things. So again, these could be hazardous. You could want to chop these down. Maybe they give you something in particular. What? I don't know, other than a type of wood. But perhaps you would want to be chopping these down, and when you're doing so, if you're too close, these like pink wormy things cause you damage maybe. That's a bit more of a speculative one, I would say. Next we got towering stalks of lichens fan out of the top like a translucent umbrella, or splitting into 5 branches before sending down tough, stinging fronds. So tough implies that these would be difficult to get rid of. You know, that if you're trying to chop them down by hand, that it takes, 10 hits or something like that, so they're tough to get rid of. Also implies tough, stinging fronds, so they are going to cause you some harm. It could be a stun mechanic, I'm not sure about that one, but, it could simply be like these have the acid effect like the spit does if you're too close to them. Whether they would also slow you down or not, I don't know, but the implication is that they will cause you damage if you get too close to them, and so if you're trying to chop them down, they will cause damage. Could that also extend to bots? Could it be if you just send your bots out to get rid of them, the bots will get damaged by them as well? That might be a tough thing to work with. The degree to which a lot of these are burnable is something I would be very interested in. Would the safest approach simply be to lob a load of flamer fuel at everything and burn it down and just get rid of it that way? That would then tend to produce a lot of pollution. So the question then is, how big of a mechanic is pollution in the game? Well, not in the game, on this planet. So next we've got the towers of beige sponge, filtering the air and releasing spores into the gentle breeze. Could spores be some kind of mechanic? I think that'd be a tough one to really play with. But we've got vibrant yellow bulb-like creatures erupt from the pores near their tops. So implication that these are alive, almost like flowers blooming in the sun. So could these have some kind of attack mechanic where you get too close and they come and cause you damage? Next up we have the bulbous trunks and actually called them mushrooms. And previous growths in a previous. So these feel like they would maybe have a bomb mechanic to them. So effectively, these are stacked up like, Gleba, which it seems to be interesting that that's the name of the planet, and that's what these are. These are spore sacs, that are, as it says, ready to rupture. So that implies to me that these are if you get too close, these will pop and they will damage you. It's a grenade equivalent for the biters, effectively, for the alien life forms. So does the fact that they have multiple ones stacked on top mean that it can hit you several times, or that it's more like a cluster grenade effect, perhaps? Interestingly, as I say, if the planet is effectively named after these, could it actually be a resource that you want to collect? So you want to collect these spores, these structures, and use them in some way. What the heck you would use them for, I don't know. But I say it's very interesting that the planet is named for these, and it has these things here. They look spiky as well, kind of. So I think they may be some kind of biological grenade that fires, or explodes when you get close. It does also mention these large soft red grapes. But it calls the things that are attached to, pierced by many thorny vines of dark fungal mycelium, which surround and guard their fruiting bodies, which sags on the ground like large soft grapes. So again, could these be some kind of thing that you want to harvest? Could they be something that, again, attacks you if you get too close? But interestingly, these are described as being thorny. So perhaps getting through this whole area is just hazardous. It's damaging to the player character if they walk on any of this surface, and it just causes them harm as they go. The last part then doesn't really imply danger, but it talks about coral and the root system, tentacle-like and spongy, so maybe it's very slow to walk on this area. So this one doesn't scream being hazardous as such. We do have the sort of algae tinged water, so maybe that's some kind of hazard that gives you a toxic effect in some way, a poison effect, if you get close to that. One of the things that has been interesting to think about for me is that you have different types of weapons compared to the biters. So you have a poison capsule, you have a slowdown capsule, you have I guess the goop is slowdown, isn't it? But you have a fire effect, poison, you have explosives and things like that, and those are effectively mechanics that they've given to you, the player, but not the enemies. So I'm wondering, as I say, if maybe one of the kind of quick ways, in the sense that they've got a mechanic that they can copy or emulate, is to give the enemies a lot of the effects that you've got. So would there become a poison mechanic? You could argue that the acid mechanic is basically the same thing, but perhaps you can get a poison effect, that you would have to cure in some way with a medical pack or something like that. And similarly, as I say, with these, they don't really have a grenade type or bomb type or like landmine type thing. Perhaps this is the equivalent to that. Perhaps on Volcanus the enemy can spit fire at you and things like that. So I'm wondering if some of the stuff we get for new enemies will be related to mechanics that we, the player, already have. Feeding into all that, and based on the speculation I was doing in my other video, my next point is whether or not, because everything is hazardous, this planet is just, hazardous to the engineer in all ways. No matter where he's standing, there's something there that wants to damage him or kill him or eat him or wipe him out in some way. Is this the planet where power armour is located? Is it that the engineer develops power armour, so shields, which would protect you from all this stuff, batteries to keep them charged, legs so that you can run faster on the surface, lasers so that you're constantly protected? All of those personal combat related personal equipment things, and Power Armour Mark II in particular, is that all based on Gleba? Is that where you can unlock all of those technologies? Because you need to be able to counteract all of the effects that the planet has on you. Those would also work in the situation where the player has turned off the biters or has set them to passive. The planets could still be hazardous, and that's why you develop all of these technologies. I've mentioned before that in my speculation video that I think this is the more combat-focused planet because it's going to have lots more enemies, but the difficulty you then got to overcome, as I say, is that unless they remove this feature, you can turn off enemies completely and you can set them to neutral, to passive. So you don't have anything driving you to make military science, to make military equipment, so there's no need to develop lasers if you've turned off biters, basically. So this would tend to give you a way, if these are little bombs that go off no matter what, then the player has to have power armour and has to have personal lasers in order to get rid of these. So next one I did just want to kind of briefly, it's sort of related to those, is the old yellow patch here, which it describes as a slime mould. That to me sets it apart from being just water. So it's not just a yellow patch of water, or like we've got the pink edged patch of water. I think this is probably, if not the resource, the secret resource on Gleba, or it might be one of the resources. In the descriptive text it says its surface is dotted with the occasional balloon of gas. I kept doing that in the read through. Collasional. Like it's collasional. So basically occasional balloon of gas. So it could just be flavour, could be another hazard implication, but to me that says this is going to be a gas producing resource. And of course back on this image, way back when we had the original tease of the space age, we had the green building, which we don't know anything about other than suggestion that it's probably on Bacchus as we thought, but is actually on therefore Gleba, and this is one of, if not the only exclusive building from that planet. To me, that tends to suggest that our speculations about gas, meaning natural gas or methane or something like that, is going to be a resource that you can harvest on Gleba, and that it will enable you to do the, shall we say, the biological side of the production in a much more efficient way, so that you can harvest gas on Gleba and it allows you to make plastic, for example, super fast, or you don't need coal for it or something like that. It lets you shortcut it. It gives you the big production boost that you get for everything else, because it's kind of the bit of the intermediates that doesn't really seem to have had any improvement or betterment or adaptation into the space age way of doing things. So I suspect that this may be some kind of resource that you can harvest. It also could introduce an interesting way of doing things, in that, as I mentioned, to me, this looks like it's something that would suck something up, okay? And I also have speculated in my... I'll try and give a link at some point, but I'm rubbish at doing that sort of stuff. But it basically sucks up the resource, meaning it sucks it up properly. So a bit like you can deplete a mining patch, but you can't deplete water. I think this might be a depletable resource, so that if you pop this thing on the edge, yeah, then it will suck everything up in this area, and that it will slowly reduce as a patch and eventually go away. But because it's a slime mould is a living creature. It's not an inanimate object like a ore patch. A slime mould is a living creature. So perhaps what you could do to manage this is you could put this down. You could put your collection thing on the edge here. Plop it down on the edge. It sucks away at this area here, and then this slime mould slowly grows back and feeds itself into your device, basically. And so that you would have the option of just completely saturating this whole thing, so that it would, get rid of it essentially like a normal patch. But you could engineer it in such a way that you put, say, 3 on, and it sort of sucks it up, and then it stops producing, and then it grows back, and then it sucks it up again, and that sort of thing. So, it's obviously wild speculation, but that's kind of what I'm almost hoping for this, that it gives a different type of harvesting resources. It could obviously just be infinite. You could slap it down, the thing's growing back all the time, and it's just there all the time, and it doesn't go away as such. But yeah, it feels like putting something that is intermediate between a exhaustible patch and an inexhaustible patch feels like a space they've not played in yet. So if it is gas, it doesn't give us much of a hint as to what the gas might be. I would speculate perhaps methane or something like that, and that it's in the biological area, because this is obviously the biological planet, and that would be a way of shortcutting a lot of the biological products. You could make plastic in particular in very high volumes very quickly, just straight from the methane, for example. But it would also be a burnable resource. If it was methane, you would expect, and we know at the moment you have to convert oils into the solid fuel before you can burn them, which is a bit weird. But it could be that we will get some way of burning liquids directly, perhaps, and that's a way of generating power. You can basically plumb methane into a burner, and it will just burn methane for you to produce power. Again, it's kind of an area they've not really done anything with, in terms of, we know we're getting a power generator on Fulgora with the lightning. Volcanus doesn't seem to have anything like that. There's no real changes been mentioned so far for like burnable or usable power. So this is an area that could see a bit of change or a bit of a new introduction. We have seen on the Fulgora map, there was that small green sort of area which looked like it was some sort of power thing benefiting from an adjacency bonus of some sort. So perhaps the engineer will, as a result of, I keep wanting to call it Bacchus, I've just got into the habit, as a result of Gleba, it gives you a way of making methane. So it's not just that you can harvest methane from the things, you can actually make methane from, say, petroleum gas type of thing, and that then becomes a way of producing power. Because although an actual gas turbine does use water, you could imagine it being done in such a way that perhaps it doesn't. It's just turning magnets and that sort of thing, and therefore you've then got a burnable resource for power that you can make out of oil that doesn't produce any, doesn't require very much or any water. So that's one possibility. It is interesting from that point of view that we very pointedly don't see, and again this is my thing with a lot of this speculation of things that I think they're deliberately not saying, tend to be bigger hints to me about things than things that they do say. There's no coal on this at all. There's not a single drop of coal. There's obviously not uranium, but we're kind of expecting there not to be uranium anywhere else. And there's no oil. So we have to be getting oil from somewhere, because we need to make, just to get off the planet, we need rocket fuel, we need plastic. So they've got to be somewhere generatable, if not creatable, if not harvestable, etc., etc. And so we do not see any spots for oil or patches for coal, but we do see iron, copper and stone, suggesting to me that those are on this planet as harvestable resources, and it's the oil and coal side of things that we will have a new resource for. Oh, I guess also just to note, there's also not like a weird coloured patch. You know how we saw like a pink one for holmium and that sort of thing? There doesn't appear to be a weird coloured patch on this. Now, whether that's because the slime mould is the patch and hasn't got a representation on the map yet, obviously we don't know, but it's interesting there's no, bright pink ore patch that you can tell. These do not look like ore patches because they don't have the checkerboard effect. Of course, there could be one. We're just not being shown it on this image. But I say it's interesting that there doesn't appear to be a weird coloured ore patch for us to speculate about. So I don't think there is one. I think it's something else. Okay, next one on this was the rain. It's very difficult to find an image where it will definitely show up because of the YouTube compression and that sort of thing. It's likely you won't be able to see it, and you're probably better off looking at the video to see this. But it's pretty much raining in every single shot we have here. There's a bit where it actually sort of says it, that there's a sort of drier bit. But is rain a mechanic in some way? This part I think is meant to be drier, is it? I can't remember which one it was, but if you go through this video, you watch it, you'll see spots of rain coming down on the camera all the time. Now that could just be atmosphere, that could just be this is the wet, gloopy, biological planet, so it's just all rain all the time. That would be very possible, but obviously when they introduced a weather mechanic on Fulgora, that was lightning, and that lightning is a harvestable resource. So if this planet is more about being hostile to the player, there's going to have to, if it is hostile, there's going to have to be something really worth getting here, because why would you even come here? I know you have to come here to do a Quillo, but why would you come here first? There's got to be something really, really great on this planet that you really, really want. So I think it's power armour and all the weapons to make your life easier everywhere else. But anyway, is rain a mechanic? Yeah? What would be a possibility? That you can collect rain in some way, that you can collect water? That could be a thing. Particularly given that the other two planets don't really have water on them. Maybe sending water is actually a sort of a reasonable and viable option. Another thing might be that it has some effect on you, the player, but also your equipment. So, for example, your machines could slowly take damage from rain over time. I kind of hope it's not that, because you're getting into survival game mechanics there. Now, we do know, part of the reason I'm mentioning is that Coverx has said, and I've actually seen him post it now, so it's not just something people have said. He has posted that there is something more controversial than quality coming. Obviously, that's in his opinion. He may be wrong. Everyone's fine with it. But I'm wondering, I'm hoping it isn't, it's some kind of survival type mechanic where your equipment degrades. So you build something on this planet, and I do wonder if this is why Arundel mentions the concreting over. I know he's saying it's a joke, but it could be that even concrete takes damage over time. And what would that mean? That would mean that you would have to be producing repair packs continuously with your bots going and flying them. Could your bots take damage from water? Could they occasionally destroy, like the mechanic in space exploration, which I think actually comes from the AAI mod? But that some bots will just fail occasionally and fall out of the sky. Could we be getting those sorts of mechanics? I say I don't want that, because it doesn't feel very Factorio to me, and it doesn't feel very like a planet that you would be able to just leave. Part of the point of these planets, and giving you all the remote controls, is that you can kind of just, once they're set up and you've done the things that you want on them, you can kind of go away and you don't have to babysit them all the time. And something like a survival mechanic where your assembly machines take damage from rain, that would be a potential problematic area, because you're going to have to make a lot of repair packs. You're going to have to be constantly using them. What if you've not got enough? What if there's some problem, etc., etc. So, and I say that type of mechanic is always controversial in any game that they put it in. There are people who love degradation mechanics, weapons in particular. Other people and I'm one of them, just find it annoying and a bit unrealistic. Things don't just fall apart if you use them 3 times. So I'm just wondering if rain is a mechanic, and that mechanic is a continuous damage effect. Very slow maybe, but yeah, I can't see why else it would be there, other than the whole thematic thing of, well, this is a wet planet, you've got lakes. One of the things it could also do is replenish these lakes, so you could perhaps be concreting over it and say it then fills the lake back in and damages your machines on that area. I don't know, it feels a little complicated and unnecessary, that, if I'm honest. It could be something that respawns all of these things, but it spawns them not necessarily where they were, but spawns them anew so that they grow up. I suppose the other thing to note on that is, what does that imply for Aquila? Say, for example, Fulgora's got a lightning mechanic, a weather effect that has an impact. Gleba's got a rain mechanic that, has an effect in some way. We've seen a tease of Aquila with the snow on it. This one here, and obviously this was, just a silly thing to have the Christmas tree. But this also teased some buildings. We believe this was Aquila. The statement at the time was that the snow, the snow definitely was like an added thing. It wasn't implemented in the game. The snow on the actual surfaces, again, it seemed to be implied that had been just applied for this specific thing, just to show something Christmassy, basically. But I'm wondering if actually there is snow on Aquila and it does have some kind of cold effect, and that it does build up on machines and you're going to have to sort them, because we've got lightning having a beneficial effect of that you can harness it for power, but it can also destroy your machines. You've got implication of rain on Gleba without any indication as to what it might do. Could this have some kind of snow effect, and that has an impact on your machines, that, as I've speculated before, you need some kind of heating source to make everything thawed out and working, or you need to harness that cold in some way. So yeah, that to me is a sort of it would be interesting if they introduced that sort of thing. If it's something like I'm suggesting of a survival mechanic, I'm not sure I'd be a big fan of that, but we'll have to see. Okay, next one then is around the icon. So we do see this one as the thumbnail. It's interesting that it specifically has the asteroids, and that asteroid is gigantic. I mean, ironically, they've done it again. They've put the shadow on the planet. But basically, I think that's the shadow for the asteroid. But it's interesting, basically, that there is a asteroid here. Now, obviously, that could be closer to us as we're looking at it, and so it's not huge. But to me, that implies that maybe giant asteroids are around this planet. That's one of the places that we can get access to these. Did they call them huge asteroids? I can't remember what the phrase they used. But what I really wanted to point out on the planet icon, it goes a bit weird, because this is this is an invisible thing, and then it shows it as white when I sort of separate it out and zoom it in. So you have to sort of ignore the edge effect there. But if you look here, there's a great big dark spot. I'm hoping that's sort of visible. Maybe can I zoom in a bit more? Is that more visible? There's a great big sort of dark spot here, and that doesn't really tie up with any of the other things we've seen. I mean, what we've got here, so this wispy effect to me is the clouds. We should have picked up on that before, but there's clouds there, mate, so that's the rain. You've got the pink stuff, which we've seen the pink to rain. Actually, let's show it on the map here. So we've got a big pink area. Yeah, big pink, and the orange is there as well. We've seen a kind of orangey colour. It doesn't show it quite as well on this big map, but certainly, there you go. So you've got the orange licheny area there, for example. The bright green isn't quite as evident, but you've certainly got bright greens on this image. The yellow as well, again, it doesn't show it too well on here. I mean, I guess that's technically yellow, but when you look at some of these surfaces, orangey yellow, lots of yellow, yellow maybe for the slime mould to represent that. The blue, the very bright blue, again, isn't really shown. So I'm wondering if that's just a representation of the blueness, but that could imply, the shallow oceans to me, that they're highly present on the thing. What it doesn't have is this thing here, and it's only shown here. So all of these other things have like big areas and like repeats. So you've got the pink there and the pink there, and you've got lots of green here and green there and blue there and blue there and blue there, and you can see the orange there. So as in these are all across the planet. This thing here is just there. And if you look at it, it's sort of a starfish shape. Yeah, it's like 5 fronds, 5 legs out of something. So what is that? I mean, it looks like a scar, or it could be like a gigantic asteroid impact or something like that. I'm just wondering about that because, as I say, this shows an asteroid. Yeah, and you can see it even better actually on that one. The little starfish shape in the section there. So is that implying that actually, as well as biters, we've got blooming asteroids going to land on this planet? Because we've not really had any confirmation whether the asteroids are a thing that impacts the planets as well as the space platforms. Because we know the space platforms are going to have to deal with them, and that they're actually useful for the space platforms. But could this be the planet where asteroids are most likely to hit and cause great big scars in the terrain, and also be a hazard for you, the player, that they're raining down on you, destroying things? Another thing is it could be something biological. This could be the biter mother source, as it were. This could be the source of all biters. It's because to me it looks like it's a fissure into the planet, is what it looks most like. I'm obviously probably reading far too much into this, and it's absolutely nothing. But to me, this looks like some kind of big scar in the planet. And perhaps this is the thing that is the controversial thing, that there is going to be a way to get to this structure. It perhaps, to make sure that you can find it, it always spawns close to your starting position. Because obviously if it was randomly located somewhere on the planet, and the planet is of the size of Nalvis, you probably would never find it. So it possibly spawns close to you at your start point. Not too close to cause you any problems, but it could be where all biters come from. And maybe there's a way of closing it, or perhaps if biters are some kind of resource on this planet, then that's your way of continuously spawning them, that you farm them, as in combat farm them, you kill them as they spawn out of this thing, and that's how you get continuous access to that resource. It could also be maybe it's a volcano, it's some kind of eruption in the surface. But as I say, my bet, if I was to bet anything, is that it is a asteroid impact, and that's going to be a hazard on this planet. It would also give an opportunity. So what happens sometimes with asteroids is that they actually launch material back into space, particularly on planets that don't have atmosphere, but we know this one does, or have thin atmospheres. The asteroid impact itself will be such that it pushes material out, so you get the explosion of stuff coming out as the asteroid hits. And it can be of sufficient force that it launches it actually into space, so it doesn't stay in orbit or come back to the surface. And there are asteroids on Earth that are actually originated from Mars, so that this has happened where it's crashed into Mars and it's fired something off, and then it's floated around in space for a bit and finally kind of crashed onto Earth. The reason I say all that is that could be the mechanic that we get for biters being in space, that asteroids hit this planet, hit Gleba, and that these chunks fly off that have got biter eggs in them. And you remember that image we saw of a biter carcass on a platform? That's how that got there, that it was something that kind of then crashed onto the space platform. So in other words, there won't just be asteroids that are ores in them, there will be asteroids that have biters in them. It would also then give a mechanic for them spreading to other planets. Now you could have that be, well, they can't reach as far as Aquila or what have you, but Nalvis could be relatively close to Gleba, and so on Nalvis we get a stream of asteroids that spawn biters in our base. So I guess the thing to end on, pretty much, is the aliens. Because this is, they've said right at the top here, it's a biological planet. The aliens are the hostile biological entity. We've got the final frame here, which has got the actual aliens on them in some way. These do look just like standard nest spawning, so I'm not sure what that means. Even at the very beginning, it talks about them being full of life more than ever. Obviously, what we've seen is all biological stuff. But certainly, the implication here is that it's more biology, more hostile things, etc., etc. And then we get this talk about the new sound, the sound of great waves crashing. That's interesting because, as I say, we don't see anywhere on here that we've got actual big oceans. So where are great waves coming from? if it's all shallow seas. So maybe there are big lakes, and then followed by an earth-shaking stomp, 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 each one louder than the last. To me, that implies two things. This is a large enemy, like big enemy, and that it comes from the sea and crashes its way onto the land. Stomp, 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 stomp would also tend to imply that it has legs. It can't stomp if it's not got legs. The one enemy we've seen a tease of, and we don't even know that this is really in the game, we've literally seen just the one image of it, is this guy. My favourite gribbly big alien guy. I mean, he's obviously huge in this picture, so it could be that it really is enormous and that we've all been misunderstanding the scale of it. It's also very wet, you know. We have observed before that it is very wet, but it doesn't have legs. So if it's going to be stomping, I don't see what it's stomping with. So he could be on this planet. He could be one of the new aliens. It could be something here. It would sort of fit thematically, I think, with the planet itself. You know, being wet and alien and having biter nests on the surface. But I don't think this is the Stompy alien. I think the Stompy alien is at the very least, I suspect it will be a properly new design, but at the very least is a gigantic regular biter. That it's an enormous biter that comes out of the sea. It normally lives in the sea. Something, you presumably, trigger it to come on land. Could that be what this thing is? That's where this gigantic biter lives and that he stomps onto land? We also had, this is the Rockets Friday Facts, where it's talking about the new rocket turret, and it did have this statement: there is another part of the space age expansion where target filtering will play a crucial role, but that is for another week. Now, one of the speculations on that obviously was that it was something that you don't want to shoot, basically. Now, whether that was because it was friendly, you know, and you didn't want to shoot it because it was your friendly ally, it's difficult to tell. The other option being, of course, that it is hazardous, but it's set on, it kind of has a, because what I'm thinking is that perhaps it is this gigantic alien. Perhaps it is this gigantic stompy alien. And the reason you don't want to target it is perhaps it's default on passive, and it doesn't damage you in any way. I would suspect, given it's a gigantic stompy alien, it can walk through your base, you know, and it can destroy your base. And so you have to make the decision: do you attack it and attempt to kill it so that it doesn't destroy your base? And maybe there's a resource you can harvest from it as well. But do you protect your base from this big stompy alien? Or do you leave it be, let it crush your base and just wander off? Because that would be quite an interesting decision to make. Do you leave it and let it do what it does? And if that just happens to flatten part of your base and require rebuilding, that's a price you have to pay. Or do you try and take it on and anger it so much that you can't, you know, if you're not well enough teched up with the damages and you've not got rocket turrets or what have you, maybe it's resistant to lasers as well. And the decision being, do I try and take it on and it has something useful for me, but also it's just, you know, if I leave it, it will flatten my entire base. It will walk through my nuclear power plants and just completely destroy my base. What, you know, how do you manage that, basically? Because, as I say, it could be so tough that you would need to be really teched up or really heavy on defence, using everything you possibly could to destroy it. Maybe even though you have the kind of dilemma of, do I load a nuke into a rocket turret in order to destroy it, but that will actually definitely destroy part of my base. So you've got all these potential options of that. And I say that the rocket, the filtering effect is literally so that you can tell all your turrets, don't shoot this alien. And that only if you flick a switch, there's some remotely trigger a switch and say, actually, no, we need to take this guy out because he's about to walk through my nuclear power plants or what have you, and completely destroy the most important part of my base that will completely disable it and leave me, you know, without a base basically on Gleba. And that you're just willing to take the risk because it's got to a crunch point, essentially, of it's going to just do too much damage, break the wrong things. Do you even try and kite it out of your base? So you put a long, you know, row of gun turrets and you trigger it in such a way that it pulls it over to these things, and then when it's so far away, it's then safe because it's wandering about in a new area. It's all angry, but it doesn't know where your base is, so it effectively leaves you alone. It'd be fun to play with a lot of those things. as to what it really is, I don't know. But as I say, all I think it really is telling us is there is a big alien, a tough alien, one that can soak up a lot of damage. It has legs, so it's not the floaty guy, and it lives in the water. Now, whether it lives in this water, the shallow water, would be a bit weird if it's that big. It's not going to fit in there. So what water is it coming out of? And how does it behave? And why would we want to be attacking it? Or perhaps it is something we want to leave alone. Related question to that then is, if that guy is triggered by pollution, like a normal biter, does that tell us anything about how pollution works on Gleba? Because I would expect there to be the same pollution mechanic that triggers the biter on Gleba. Is this... It's all biological, everything is biological, so is it more absorbent of pollution or less? Because the types of things that are there are very different to normal trees and normal grass. So is there like no pollution absorption? So any pollution you generate is going to float across the map and trigger biters. Is that how we have the dilemma of how much industry do we make versus triggering biters? Because that, to me, I've mentioned before, efficiency doesn't really seem to have had any kind of buff or improvement or change really in the game. Now, it's more useful because of the space platforms in particular, but it doesn't really seem to have had any kind of improvement or kind of building into the machines. We know that they've changed the beacons, which is about speed. We know that the machines themselves, the new ones, have a higher productivity inbuilt to them and can take more slots for prod modules. Efficiency doesn't really seem to be gaining in that way. So could it be that sticking efficiency modules into everything you build on Gleba is actually the way to go, because it massively reduces your pollution and the hidden benefit of efficiency, of where it reduces your power demand and therefore increases its pollution benefit, because the actual surface itself is really bad at absorbing pollution, and it would just be continuous attacks all the time without them. I suppose the other thing to mention, of course, is there any new combat stuff on here? As I think the power armour stuff will have been moved to this planet, but does it also give us more combat things? Is artillery on this planet now? And that's, how we do it. I mean, refer to my speculation video. I don't think that we've really disproven anything I've said, and that I think this may be like where the explosives are, and all of that is very focused on that. So I still stand by most of that stuff so far. But yes, I'm wondering if there are new combat mechanics, or that more than just artillery has moved here. So perhaps we don't get some kind... I mean, say this could be the cliff explosive planet, because of explosives being on there, but things that attack us or damage us, for example, poison, could be a mechanic on this planet, and we only can develop poison grenades once we've been to this planet and we've kind of learned how to do poison, if you see what I mean. So it could work more like that. So that it's not that they necessarily introduce too many more new weapons, it's that they move them here because it's related to how the enemies attack you as well now. But so the big question with that is around, if it is a combat-focused planet, and that's like why it's there, how do you sort of counteract the fact that you can both turn biters off and turn off aggressiveness and turn off pollution? So you can give yourself a lot easier time with those sides of the game. So this planet having a military theme could be rendered a bit mute. The counter to that, of course, is that you're always going to need gun turrets, etc., for your space platforms in order to protect them from asteroids and to harvest asteroids. So no matter what you do, military stuff is going to be part of the game, and that this is therefore the planet that allows you to buff and improve and what have you, the military things. And by making like Mark II power armour locked here as well, even if you never use that for personal lasers or anything, having the legs, etc., is really going to be beneficial. That then does imply perhaps that it's another feed-in for this automaton thing that we've been speculating about, that the automated remote player avatar thing that was teased in that video. Perhaps it's a big part of this as well. You can only build that once you've got all of your power armour buffs and etc. I hadn't realised that, so there appears to be alt text on these. I wonder if that's always been there, I just never spotted it. So going through the alt text, we've got Gleba planet icon, fair enough. This next one then, Gleba green swamp invaded by the roots of various specimens of hairy club nubs. Okay. So these blue frondy guys are hairy club nubs. That's a great name. Gleba slimy shore with funnel trunk microfungus. Okay. So this must be a funnel trunk microfungus. A string frond ancient cluster on the top of the torrent spreading spores in a ghostly fashion. Okay, so there are spores spreading. I wonder if that's the sort of misty effect that's going on there. But those are what? String frond... string fronds. So it's an ancient cluster of string fronds, okay. The spongy formations of the sunnycomb. Oh, that sounds pleasant, that. So that's a sunnycomb. Okay. It's easy to end up sneezing while crossing the lands of the spore core area due to the amount of spores liberated by the fleshy boom puffs. Okay, so it sounds like they do explode. This is fascinating. I don't know if they've done this on all the others. Must have done. Entering into the meatlands. Meatlands. Okay. Okay, meatlands. That's interesting. I mean, looking at that, does that not look like the biter surface effect? It's not the same, but it's very similar, isn't it? Next week, I'm sort of assuming we'll get to find out what those mechanics are. So what the new buildings are, what they're used for, what resource they harvest, what they produce, etc, etc. So if we're following the pattern like we have before, that should be what we find out about next. They're great fun to do these, but there's usually far too much for me to speculate about. If you've spotted anything else or you've got any other ideas, I'd love to hear them. But I have to make these videos practical to edit, and they take hours to record and edit. So I'm trying to focus on the things that are sort of the most interesting or kind of confirmed theories that I've already had. But if you've seen anything, do let me know. But that's also why my voice goes sometimes on these longer ones. You can hear it sort of getting more croaky as I'm just talking and talking and talking. So there we go. That's all my speculation. How many hours long this video is, I don't know, but it will be. It will be a tough one to edit. So likes and comments and what have you would be very much appreciated. As I think this is going to be quite a long one, and I hope you've enjoyed the speculation. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you'd like to chat about the latest Factorio Friday Facts, you can find me live streaming Factorio every weekend on my Twitch channel @Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers.